All right, it is the death lineup. We took last week off because A, the finals were kind of boring, and B, we actually had we were both hanging out in San Francisco on Thursday, but we're back this week to talk about some Warriors basketball, to talk about some NBA, some draft, some other stuff that's going on in basketball today. So let's kick it off. I'm very interested in what you're thinking about when it comes to Klay. And let's go with the guise of you have to make a prediction one way or the other. Is Klay leaving? Is Klay coming back? Your mic's not on.
Hello.
Yep, now you're on.
I don't know why.
Now you're back off.
Hello. My prediction is that he's leaving.
Oh, it is. Wow.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, I would go with leaving. I don't know. It just feels like he could still. Are you serious? You can't hear me?
Your mic keeps cutting in and out. I wonder if it's that cord.
I untangled. I could switch mics. It's never.
Yeah, your mic was it just whenever you move, it kind of cuts out. Okay, while you're fixing your mic, I will give you my thoughts because I'm glad that you said that you think he's leaving because I think he's bluffing. And here's what I'll say about that. Klay is a very I think he's a very thoughtful person. Like he comes off kind of aloof sometimes, but I think a lot of times he's trying to make sure he doesn't say the wrong thing, and so being aloof kind of helps him make sure he doesn't have like a bad quote or something. But we've watched this guy for the last several years try to be the Klay of old, and because of injuries, he's not able to do that all of the time. Now he can turn back the clock probably 10 to 15 games a year where he's the Klay of old, and then there's another 20 or 30 games where he's got it for like a half and then doesn't have it for the full game, and then there's another 30 games where you're like, okay, he's still going to be a threat, but he's just not going to be the guy who scares the other teams as much as he used to. And all of that being said, I think he really, really wants to play with Steph. He really, really wants to play with Draymond. It's kind of one of those things where you're almost at the point of your career where having to change systems, having to change teammates, having to learn processes, having to learn how different organizations do things. I don't think he wants to do any of those things. But what his leverage is the ability to say, I'm unhappy, is the ability to unfollow on social media. And I think that stuff, to me, just proves how emotional the decision is. And look, Debo did the same thing, and then he re-signed. Like, it's a strategy. It's a way to show your fans, like, hey, you put some pressure on this team. They may not be treating me the right way. By the way, did you see this is Rod and I will talk about this on Sunday. We're going to do an episode of We Want Winners Sunday night. But did you see Brandon Ayuk basically tell a podcast that the 49ers don't want him?
Yeah, I saw that.
And that can't be further from the truth. They obviously want him, but they may not want him at the price that he wants to sign. So I'm saying all of these things to say, I think Klay's negotiating. I think Klay's leveraging. I think Klay's doing everything his agent wants him to do to drive up the Warriors. And at some point, he's going to have to make a decision. He's going to pull back and say, okay, I get it. I'm going to meet you halfway. Or He's gonna do all this thing that I just said that he probably doesn't wanna do, which is relearn his entire basketball career, and I am leaning towards eventually, it may not be nice, it may not be fun, he may have to give up a lot of money in this scenario, but I do think he's going to come back, and he's going to come back at a fair price for both parties.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I've never used this mic in a podcast, so we'll see how it goes. But I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. I think for me, it boils down to how much money is he willing to leave on the table? Because I still think he can go fetch himself something nice on the market, especially with these teams that have the cap space to throw around, because the majority of their players are young players who haven't even had to do their rookie extension yet. Like, I feel like Orlando is, the spot that kind of just makes a lot of sense. They have a lot of cap space. They need shooting. They could throw a bag at Klay. And he also kind of fits what they're doing with, like, not really giving up on size. Klay's 6'7". All their guys are like 6'7" and up. I think it's just because what if Orlando throws him $25 million per year? Like, and what are the Warriors? What do you think the Warriors will stop at? I remember TK tossing around like a 14 not that long ago. Like, is he about to give up $40+ million
So
to stay in Golden State?
It sounds like he wants a 3-year deal, right? We've seen that number, that contract length floated out there, like it has to be a 3-year deal.
Sure.
If it is 25 from the Magic or 20 from the Warriors, do you think he actually takes the Magic offer for $5 more million?
So 5 more doesn't. I mean, look, I had never made anything close to that money, so I don't know. But if like $5 billion, 15 you're leaving on the table if it's a 3-year deal. Like, sure, that doesn't sound completely awful, but if you're talking 10 and you're doubling that to 30, the Warriors are only willing to give him the 14 to 15 that, quite frankly, I've seen, or maybe the 17, 18 on the high end. Like, I think things start to change, and that's kind of where my opinion leads, is like, I think, like, I've said this stuff on the podcast where it's like he can get away with, not kind of showing up to a press conference after he stunk up the game and needs to provide answers. Like, he could only do that on Golden State. He's built this rapport with the team, with the media. Like, I get all that. I get not wanting. Well, luckily for him, I don't know about luckily, but he doesn't have a family where, like, he doesn't have a wife, he doesn't have a child, so he doesn't have to like uproot them and move them to Orlando. It's just him, and I think it's different. Like, if it was, the whole family, I think that would be different. But yeah, I don't think. I just think it comes down to the money. And I think that there are teams out there who would value what he brings to the table and have money to spend, whereas the Warriors do not have the money to spend. So that's kind of where
they do have the money to spend.
How?
They have to choose. Joe Lacob has to choose how much of it he wants to spend to keep these guys together. Okay, so here's something that I have not heard a ton about. Are the Warriors a more marketable team going 500 with Steph, Draymond, and Klay? I think the answer is yes, versus with only 2 of them. I think they are a more marketable franchise if you have your big 3 together.
Yeah, but is the other option you don't have your big 3, but you're like winning more? Or are you just saying it's
well? I'm just saying if it's apples to apples, if you're 41-41 with Klay or without Klay,
I'm sure
how much money is worth keeping Klay on the team? Like, because you're gonna be more in the tax probably, unless if you don't bring back Klay, do you bring back CP? Like, that's another thing, right? Are you gonna get rid of both of those guys? And then who is going to take up your second and third guard minutes?
Yeah, well,
you lose both of them.
The best case scenario, if Klay decides to leave, that he wants to leave, is to pull off a sign and trade. Because, yeah, Klay walking for nothing benefits the Warriors like not at all. So, putting together a sign and trade is probably how you are able to not just lose Klay and CP and not replace them in the lineup. You still get to do something.
They're
So
not
I mean,
getting
it's
Josh
like
Giddey.
not getting no Josh Giddey. But Orlando, like, who do they like? What, Wendell Carter Jr.
I like Wendell. I'm a bigger fan of Wendell
Than the
than
consensus.
well, not only than the consensus, but then how well he actually plays. Like
Yeah.
the idea of Wendell Carter, I really love it. And then I watch
What
him
about
play.
Cole Anthony?
I like Cole Anthony.
That would be
He's a
interesting.
go-getter.
Yeah, because like just like this little scoring punch. I mean, that's what it would be, right? It'd be like a Klay. If it, I don't know the logistics. I always forget with this new CBA, like what the kind of, if they can do it or not. I think they can, but yeah, it would be like that type of, or I've been saying like Milwaukee for like Brook Lopez.
Mm-hmm.
Like if that can happen, that would be like a sign and trade there. But
Okay,
if
so
Klay wants to stay, I would love to have him. I just don't think it could be.
gun to your head, you think he leaves?
Yeah.
Okay, well that's good. I'm glad that we had different opinions because then we kind of were able to flesh them out both ways and both sides. All right, so some news that came out recently. Gary Payton II, as we expected, is picking up his option for $9 million. So that makes the Warriors books a bit harder, though he does fit nicely, probably more nicely, in a trade package at that price. Just if you're thinking about matching money, so they're gonna have to figure out what's going on with GP, and then we have this Chris Paul decision that is coming out. I think by next Friday, they sort of have
It's on
to
my
figure
birthday.
out. Yeah, it is on your birthday. They kind of have to figure out what is going to happen because that the day where the $30 million option kicks in.
Like, yeah, I guess it becomes
That's
like
the decision
guaranteed.
day. Yeah, the
Yeah.
decision day that they have to make that decision. So that's another thing. Like they have, and then I'll add the last one, which is Kevon Looney. Whether or not you're going to pick up all of his salary or you buy him out essentially for a third of it or whatever that number is. That's another thing, right? You have Klay Thompson, obviously one of the big three, but you do have someone like Kevon Looney who was the starting center just now three championship seasons ago for the Warriors. But this is basketball, man. This is these decisions that they have to make, like making a decision on Kevon Looney. It doesn't feel like it's kind of a big deal, but it's these decisions that really, I mean, let's compare it to baseball. Thompson to Clark, we're doing all these shows, and the thing that just sticks with me about the Giants is, if they get an injury, who do they turn to? And it's like the person they turn to would not be playing on like a lot of really good teams. Like their depth is just so bad with some of these players. Like they have so many guys on their roster or in available to them who would be like a great bench player for the other team, but they have to start these guys. And so like a Kevon Looney, you're going to make a decision on him. We probably think the NBA and the way the game is going may have passed him by a little bit. But what does that turn into? Because if you lose the veteranness, you lose the locker room guy, you lose the support system of a Kevon Looney. You can't bring in, somebody who's not going to fit that role, because what if they also can't play? So you take away the goodness of what Kevon Looney does and you replace it with, a nothing. So that these are why these decisions I think are more important than fans realize, because fans only look at it, and I include us, we're fans, but people look at it as like, okay, is this guy going to give us buckets? How is he going to fit in this lineup? Like there's other pieces of this because the Warriors have a young team. Looney was on a podcast recently. Oh, he was on with Draymond. And Draymond, of course, Draymond making himself the center of the Jordan Poole story, like always, said, the thing that he regrets the most. I would have regretted punching the man in the face, by the way. But what Draymond regretted the most was not being able to celebrate Jordan Poole getting that deal, because that is a part of this as well. As these players, this is a fraternity. You celebrate the guys making money because it's just, this is, there's not many people who do this, and you root for your guys. So, and Kevon Looney is kind of he's the, he's not a superstar, so he doesn't have so many responsibilities like a Steph, but he's able to be that, like, conscious of the locker room. So I think that's a very important move that they have to make if they are going to give him up. They need to bring like-minded players into that locker room, and at the same time, someone that Draymond is going to respect, because you bring in a like-minded player who's the conscience of the locker room, and Draymond does not respect that person, that could be a bad thing as well. So lots of little things like that happening with this team. But what is your kind of hope for these next few days, as far as right before free agency? Are you hoping that they find a landing spot for CP? It would be great to trade him rather than just to lose him. Same with, Kevon. I don't know if they're takers for Kevon, but what do you want to see happen in these next couple days before the actual free agency period and draft start?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to do what OKC did, which is take advantage of a really stupid organization trading Giddy for Caruso straight up, man. That'd be ideal, taking advantage of a silly, stupid organization. But no, I mean, I don't know. I think there's like this theme of, like, do we bring all the three guys back, and we're maybe not the greatest, but it's kumbaya because we showed loyalty, and I'm all for showing loyalty. I want them to try and get Klay back, but if they can't, like, I'm kind of betting on him just wanting to get more money. But I guess what I'm trying to say is like, with like Kobe in like 2016, like the whole farewell tour, like he wasn't that good anymore, right? Like he wasn't like an all-star level talent, even though he did have that crazy scoring game on the last game of the season, last game of his career. What I'm trying to say is Steph is still, I think, a top 10 player in this league. Steph is still someone that I think at his best can be a best player on a championship team. So I just am not a fan of, like, I guess, sacrificing those years for like a kumbaya, bring everyone back, 500 team, play in. Like, I want them to go after it. And that's kind of like, I don't, when Caruso was still on Chicago, I thought that there was maybe like a Levine Caruso type of package that we could like maneuver and get, not even trading Kuminga. And I was for that. But now that Caruso's gone, I'm not sure that makes as much sense anymore. But yeah, no, I still want them to like really compete in free agency and in these trade talks and find a way. I'm not a GM, but like, it's Paul George gettable. Could even talk about, the Brandon Ingram stuff still is, I guess you could still toss around Zach LaVine. There was the Jimmy Butler rumors. Like, what is available? Because I still want to see Steph try and compete, because like, we're never going to have this again. I'm never going to go to a Warrior game and kind of be like 2 inches off my seat when he gets the ball, because I know I'm about to jump in the air as he's taking a long three. Like, I just hope that, that there's no farewell tour, because when you do a farewell tour, it's kind of like you're doing that instead of promoting a winning season, a winning product. You're gonna suck, and you're just doing that because this player's leaving and they've been with you forever, and you're gonna suck. And it makes it like kind of lighthearted and fun in a losing season.
And then Draymond is at the free throw line telling you that they don't love you like Kobe.
Yeah, I just don't think we're at that point. Like, they're still so good. Draymond, is his own worst enemy, but like Steph is so good, and I think Klay is great as well in his own reduced role these days. So yeah, I just want them to be competitive.
One other thing I wondered about, the shoe company is a pretty big deal these days. I think Klay has a 10-year deal with Anta. I don't know if the money is necessarily that big to where Anta would be like, "Hey man, we'd rather you be in the Bay Area." But for a Chinese branded shoe company, I would imagine San Francisco is a better market than Florida for them. I don't know. I don't know if that means anything. Essentially, is what I'm saying. But I just
Mm.
thought about that. I wonder what Anta wants because they pay him um, a long-term deal, and I'm sure he wants to keep that deal going as long
Yeah.
as he can as well. You mentioned the free agency, so let's actually just look at some guys, and then we'll come back to the finals that I kind of did not really pay attention to after game 2. But the Athletic has their top free agents on the board. LeBron is 1, Tyrese Maxey's 2. I think we both think that those guys are going back to their teams, unless you think that there is an outside shot that somebody can get LeBron. I don't know. They just signed his podcast partner to be the head coach. So,
Oh man, I mean, just wait for what Bronny does. Not what Bronny does. What team drafts him? I don't believe the smoke that LeBron doesn't care anymore what team drafts Bronny. I think he loves it in LA, but I still think like it's just this thing that's never been done before, where father and son play on the same team. Like I can't imagine him passing up that opportunity. So I feel like that's smoke, so that teams will be dissuaded from taking Bronny, so the Lakers could just take him. I hope Minnesota just does something weird and just grabs him.
So the free agency period probably starts with Paul George. He is third on the Athletics list of free agents, and he is one who is rumored. We've heard Philly, Orlando is out there. He could always go back to the Clippers, but he is, I think, top of the board here. Harden is probably going back to the Clippers. Siakam is probably going to be re-signed by the
He already
Pacers.
signed. He already signed.
Or at least he agreed.
Yeah, he agreed. Sorry, I forgot about that. Yeah, he agreed.
Next on this list, OG, Emmanuel Quigley. I haven't heard too much about those guys and what their markets are. I would imagine, I don't know, OG, how well he fit with the Knicks, but he was hurt for some of that playoffs, right?
I heard he might not go back, which is weird. Like, New York sends Quickly and RJ Barrett, 2 young core pieces for him. You'd think that there was just like almost a verbal agreement to resign, but no. And then Quickly on Toronto. I can't imagine Quickly leaves Toronto, but yeah, OG. I've been hearing noise that I've seen Pacers fans want OG, which would be nuts. But yeah,
D'Angelo Russell, DeMar DeRozan. What about DeMar on the Warriors?
it's interesting for sure. I think my kind of conclusion to the CP experiment was that the styles were just too contrasting. And it ended up just like being, I think, too much for like the role players and the young guys to like understand how to adapt to each style. When Steph is on the floor with Draymond, it's a different offense than when CP's on the floor. It's just an entirely different offense. I think you got to be consistent all the way through your roster with like running the same stuff. And I feel like if DeMar was on the team, we might have a similar thing. I'm not entirely sure about that theory because I know CP is a point guard ball dominant guy, needs the ball in his hands, where DeMar is like a scorer. So I don't know, but that would be like my initial hesitancy, I think.
KCP, DeAnthony Melton, Tobias Harris, they're kind of in this third tier on this list from John Hollinger. And then after these guys is tier 4 mid-level guys, Okoro, Nick Claxton, who he's it's funny. I think, what did Bill Simmons call him? He's like the guy who he makes too much money to where if you sign him, then you regret it immediately. But then when he signs with someone else's team, then you regret it immediately. Like there's like no real good in between with Nick. CP is on this list as well. You know who's not on this list? Also, your guy Sadiq Bey is on this list at number 17. You know who's not on this list?
Is this John
25?
Hollinger's?
Yeah.
Yeah, Klay. I heard
no Klay.
Plus Minus podcast.
No Klay at all. Miles Bridges, number 25. Buddy Hield, 24. Obi Toppin, 23. Caleb Martin, 22. Malik Monk, 21. I would have thought Malik Monk would have been higher than some of these guys, but it's just possible. It's one of those things where he plays so well against the Warriors that I think he plays that well against everyone else. Because like, who would you rather have, Spencer Dinwiddie or Malik Monk?
Malik Monk, 100%.
100%.
130%. But I think what his list probably has to do with in terms of rankings, not necessarily like the best player. It's kind of like what the best player for the best deal would be.
Yeah,
Like
the kind
maybe
of
he thinks Monk's going to get overpaid, so it's like a lower
the target
on the list.
of where their
Yeah.
salary also fits. So, yeah, I don't think this free agency is going to set anybody's world on fire, but there could be some pretty good players mixing teams here or switching teams. And I don't know. I just feel like the Warriors are probably not the top place for some of these guys to go anymore, both because they don't have the money and also because you're like, well, we have to play this specific way because this is the way the Warriors play, and it may not be best suited for my game.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that they're going to be like on the top free agents. I think I'm just looking at trade. I'm looking at the unhappy star, that weird NBA shakeup that you get like a report that X player is unhappy in like July. I'm just waiting for. That's kind of what I'm keeping my eye on, not necessarily free agents. Even Paul George, like sign and trade, can that happen? So I don't know.
All right, let's quickly talk about the end of the NBA Finals. I was so happy that this series was done when it was done. I did not want to watch any more of this series. I'm not really into the Celtics. Like the idea of the Celtics, and some of it is because they just have won so many titles as a historical fan base. It's either if it's Celtics and Lakers, I'll go with the Celtics. But if it's Celtics against anybody else, I'm rooting for anybody else. And I just didn't need to see. I don't know. I was fine with them kind of coming up short every time, but they they conquered it. They got it. They had a fantastic regular season. I guess I'm more disappointed in Denver's lack of competitiveness, really, in many of these games. Like I know some of the scores were a little bit closer than I thought the games
Dallas's.
were. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, the Mavericks. But yeah, I don't know. Just like kind of a nothing series. Like I don't think there was any doubt what was going to happen pretty much after game one.
Yeah, completely agree. I think the only one that could have gave Boston problems was maybe Denver or Minnesota. So I think I personally got my hopes up because I was like, oh wow, Dallas beat a team that I thought could give Boston problems. Therefore, maybe they can give Boston problems. And it's like, no, the West is just like pretty matchup based. And just because they give one team problems doesn't mean they're going to give another team problems. Like I think Denver would have beaten Dallas in a 7-game series, but Minnesota beats Denver, but Minnesota can't beat Dallas, like this weird little triangle thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I told myself 6. I mean, I should have said 4.
I was hopeful for Luka, like turning into the next version of that great player who just will not let his team lose. I still didn't think they were going to win, but I just thought, I'm like, okay, this is his time to turn into the Magic or Larry or Michael or LeBron's different, but just the Paul Pierce, who just carries this team and wills this team to some victories. It just didn't happen. Like, not that he played poorly. I guess the other thing that, we talked about this is Boston's been there before. They got their reps in when they lost to the Warriors. And then you have like Derek Lively playing in his first finals. How was he going to adapt? Gafford playing in his finals. And the one who actually, those guys expectedly did not play fantastic, but the one who was most disappointing, even though he's getting a lot of credit now because he is a supportive teammate, is Kyrie. What do you have? One good game?
Yeah, one good game, the one they won, and that was it.
And he's getting so much patting on the back because when they lost at the end of game 5, he just didn't selfishly race off the court. He stayed behind and patted his teammates on the back. Great teammate, Kyrie.
He did the LeBron thing where he goes and dabs up the other team mid-game.
Whatever.
When LeBron did it in the finals.
Just play, play good. Just play like you're one of the best players, which I don't think he is. So that's all this. I guess it was Stan Van Gundy who was kind of leading the brigade of greatest backcourt ever. Luka and Kyrie.
He's
Give
dumb.
me a break. Anytime anyone says best thing ever and it's like the regular season or like the first round of the playoffs, or just tell that person to stop, because it's you don't get that acclaim unless you actually do it when it counts the most. So no, I'm not an anti Kyrie guy either. I just was like, yeah, you didn't hold up your end of the bargain, dude. That's why the series was so uncompetitive.
Yeah, and then Luca defense. I feel like a big winner of this series was defense still wins championships. So, Dallas was this overpowering offensive team with the two guys in the backcourt, and it's like, okay, let's get like 2-6-5 guys, 2-6-6, 2-6-7, and just like surround them and just make them uncomfortable the whole time. And the only bad thing is I feel like Dallas's team is more replicable for the Warriors than Boston's, but Boston kicked their butt.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I think Steph is less of a cone on defense than Luca is, and I think there's still things that the Warriors could do. But
My hope for Luca is that he finally puts on a little muscle and sheds some weight and comes in, like somebody who learned something from this final. Like, this happens, right? All the great players get beat up and they lose and then they come back better. Like, that's the genesis of how this thing works. Like, historically, the one is like, Michael Jordan, sick of getting beat up by the Pistons, starts lifting weights seriously in the offseason to get stronger so that he can sustain these beatings. And then he goes and gets past Detroit and gets the NBA finals, wins finals. I want to see Luka take that part seriously as well. Like, he has a good opportunity, I think, to be, one of the greatest offensive players we've ever seen. But if as the season wears on, he gets hurt or he's, wearing down or whatever, like, that's a sign for him that he's got to get in better shape. And maybe I don't know what his weightlifting. I'm sure he lifts weights. I don't know what his regimen is, but yeah, I think if he actually takes that seriously, he could be an absolute beast. And then he won't be a cone on defense, as you said. He'll be much quicker. By the way, Jaylen Brown. What do you think about Kawakami's Jaylen Brown, Jonathan Kuminga comparison?
I feel like we could like match stats, and then there's just like really no shot that like Kuminga becomes Jaylen Brown. I don't want to put a ceiling on JK, but what did Jaylen Brown shoot from 3?
I'll look up his stats while you talk.
Like, yeah, what was his like Basketball Reference side-by-side comparison of a year-to-year progression from 3-point percentage attempts in comparison to Kuminga's? Like, I've got to imagine there was more promise from the 3-point line than JK, but I don't know. We keep seeing these JK summer workout videos in Paris, and it's like they're like really like showing his handle, and I'm like, this just doesn't look good. This just looks like rippable. But
So Jaylen Brown, his best 3-point shooting years were actually his second year in the league. He shot almost 40% on 4.4 attempts. And the 2020-2021 season, he shot 39.7 at 7.1 attempts.
damn.
And then not this year, but last year, he only shot 34% off of his highest attempts ever. And so he shot less threes this year, which is probably the reason why his scoring was down. He actually made about a 3.5. No, he made about 0.3 threes less per game this year. But his overall field goal shooting was up on less shots and less threes. So his game got a little bit more efficient as some of those counting stats went down a little bit. But he only shot 35% this year from 3. So it's not like he's shooting bonkers numbers. It's just
He's taking a lot of attempts.
Yeah, he's shooting enough to where when he's making them, you got to guard him. And the other thing that JK doesn't have that Jaylen Brown has, JK doesn't have that mean streak yet. I don't know if he might be just a nice guy. I don't know if he's going to get that mean streak, right? Like he's he kind of came into the league as a little bit of a dandy of a prospect, and you know how those guys come in, and it's not like Jaylen Brown wasn't a great props. Like I think he's a number 3 pick in his draft,
Yeah.
but he seemed like he had a little bit of a thing on his shoulder pretty much from right when he came into the league that we haven't seen that from JK yet. I'm not saying it doesn't exist or it can't exist. We just haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the JK to JB comparison all relies on like the 3-point, if we think he's gonna be like a good 3-point shooter, because like that year 2 of JK having like a 40% from 3, like how many attempts was that?
He made 37% of his threes, not this past year, but the year before, off of
This is JK.
2.2 attempts. This is JK.
Like, do you ever see him turning into like 7 attempts? 7 attempts from 3.
I would like to see him get to 5, but you know what the problem is his coach doesn't want him to shoot him unless he's wide open in the corner. That's the problem.
Yeah, and another thing with the JK thing is like even just looking at like Derek White. Like he was the 5th best player on the Celtics, or the 4th or whatever. And he's taking shots, like 3-point shots that I feel like are contested, but you know, I guess for him they're not, and he makes it. And I'm just thinking of like if JK can like even ever turn into like any of these guys from Boston, these 2-way wings that can shoot from 3, and it's like JK will not shoot the ball unless he's butt crack wide open.
Yep.
Like how do you, you know, I know there are like, I know you can work on your shot in the summer and shit and stuff like that, but like how can you like completely transform from a guy who shoots 3-pointers a game only when they're completely wide open to someone who has to be respected and guarded, also shooting 5 to 7 attempts? That feels like a big like change. In the NBA, there are
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, you know, we hear about prospects that are like, oh, they're question shooting, like they don't really like the Thompson twins. They aren't gonna be like good shooters, and then we're kind of like thinking like, okay, they'll probably never develop a jump shot, like probably never.
You know
So it's
why?
like,
Because they don't want people to make fun of them on Twitter and Instagram and stuff. That's why they're so risk averse to like really failing through it. Like there's so much of that in today's young players, as well as they're so worried about getting shown up and getting made fun of.
yeah, and like, okay, so it's like we have guys who are just like, you know, shooting's the question going into the draft, and then now we're don't think it'll ever happen, and now we're thinking like Kuminga, you know, guy who shoots 3 attempts, maybe he can get to 7, and maybe he can up a shooting percentage by like 15% on like, and then maybe he can shoot contested ones. Like it's too much. I don't know. I'd be pessimistic for that. I'd love to see it happen, but I'd be on the pessimistic side.
So Tim's comparison comes from Jaylen Brown's 2nd and 3rd season in the league. He was 14.5 points in his 2nd season. 3rd season, he actually dropped to 13 points per game. And he shot about 34% from 3 on less than 4 attempts in his 3rd season. So compare that to JK's 3rd season. JK 16 points, so higher than Jaylen Brown's. But JK only shot 32% from 3 last year off of 2.2 attempts, though because he gets to the rim, his field goal percentage was 53% overall. And Jaylen Brown was not that efficient with his 2-pointers. You know, they're slightly different positions as well. JK is a lot bigger than Jaylen Brown. I understand the comparison, and I think Tim is he's probably looking at it like we are, which is, man, if I could take one guy off of Boston who could give the Warriors a little bit of oomph, it'd be Jaylen Brown. We said this during the finals 3 years ago. And you look at the numbers and you look at the build and you look at the athleticism and you go, man, JK, could he become a Jaylen Brown, or could he get close? Like if he even gets close to Jaylen Brown, that's a positive. And so thus do you want to trade that guy? And you probably don't. But I guess the thing that I would continue to say is Jaylen Brown is nasty, man. Jaylen Brown's picking fights with Draymond. You know, can you see, Kuminga being in that mix with Draymond. Kuminga's a little bit younger than Brown was, but still, like he
I
seems like
actually
too much
can.
like
I can
seems like
see
a baby
Kaminga
deer.
like I can see Kaminga like kind of being put up like enough is enough type of. I think he could get into like a little having like that type of mentality. I don't know if JB did that, first couple years. Um,
Yeah, I would love
so
to see it. That would excite me more than anything else, I think, is to see Kuminga have like a little bit of a nasty streak. And I'm not talking about a um, like a edge or like an attitude. I mean like a real nasty streak, as in like, oh, I want to dunk on this guy's head now. Like that's the streak that I would like to see Kuminga get. Like, oh, that guy just scored on me. Now I want to dunk on his head. And if we see that out of Kuminga, like that's where that competitiveness and that engine comes in. I think they would I think that would be even just as beneficial as him being more comfortable letting the three ball go a little bit. Okay, let's end this. The NBA draft is next week. It's a 2-night thing, right?
yep, first round, second round.
Actually, I think one of those is during the daytime. So it's Wednesday and Thursday. So essentially, by the time we record, it's quite possible
It's gonna be over.
that it will be over and we will know who the Warriors pick. So we'll be able to come on this show and talk about who they pick. If they pick anybody, what if they just bail out of the draft completely? So that'll be next week. But is there anybody that you have your eye on that you would be like, that's actually amazing that the Warriors drafted this guy in what people are saying is like a really bad draft?
Bronny James. No, I don't know. I honestly don't have a good answer for you here. Like I know that the Slater put out a piece. I checked it out. Some intriguing names. Kid from Arizona. That'd be fun. Other than that, I don't really know much about the second round of this draft, honestly, at all. So
The first year that they do this 2-day draft, uh
and it's the worst draft ever.
yeah, and like night one is going to be on ABC, simulcasted ABC and ESPN. And we're like, who's the guy? Alexander Sarr or whatever the kid's name
Yeah.
is supposed to be
And
the first pick.
he's not even gonna go number one anymore.
Oh,
I
really?
guess
He got taken
Atlanta
out number
can't get
one.
him for a workout. Like he's not going to Atlanta for a workout.
Oh man, he's
Good,
like,
hey, good for him if they don't plan on like rebuilding. Like he's like, put me on the starting lineup right first day. Go send me to Washington. I know it's a bad team, but I'll get my reps.
somebody needs to rebound for Trae Young.
Yeah, but they have Clint Capella on Yeko Kongwu.
Oh yeah, you're right. True. Hey man, it's a good guys to kind of get your feet wet with battle those guys. If
Like
I'm Atlanta, I'm like, fine. You don't want to fight? We'll find somebody else.
like I keep seeing that this kid Donovan Clingan from UConn is like maybe not the favorite to go number one, but has a lot of noise to go number one. And
Mm-hmm.
he is basically just like a drop coverage, big rim protector, kind of like athletic. Uh, like I think he's like got a Roy Hibbert comp. And he might go number one. And I keep talking to I've talked to a draft analyst, I listen to podcasts, and it just sounds like they're just so off of like potential. Like they're just drafting like this guy is just for sure gonna be like good and he's gonna be in the league. And like that's all you can ask for at the number one in this draft. I don't agree with that mentality because I think that Alex Sarr, has more like a pathway to becoming like a Jaren Jackson Jr. Whereas this Donovan Clingan kid, might become like a Brooke Lopez at some point. But maybe he's just a bona fide like Walker Kessler, and it's just I don't know. I think a lot of I personally love taking swings. I like taking like the potential guy, and sometimes it's probably not going to work out. But it seems like this Donovan Clingan UConn center is drawing a lot of noise simply because like he has a high floor, like not even an all-star floor, like maybe right below an all-star floor, but it's like the best floor out of anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see.
All right, you had somebody draft somebody from the draft expertise area of podcasts on yours the other day.
Yeah,
me and my buddy Neil, like I said in our last show on this pod, I said that we were starting to do a draft show. I think our first episode was just Neil giving me his top 10 prospects. The second episode was us looking into those top 10 prospects and seeing what the best fit for those prospects would be as a team. And then also looking at on a team level of like what teams would want what prospects out of his top 10. And then episode 3 was we got this guy named Evan Townsend on the show. He does draft coverage and he does Spurs coverage. So he gave us some insight, and it's just interesting the way his mind worked in regard to prospects, because we're like telling him, a prospect, and he's thinking in his head, he's like, okay, will he be able to pick a corner, go 3 attempts and get hot from a corner, like just thinking like on that level, like that detailed level of the game that I guess don't think of. But yeah, and then episode 4, I'm currently in talks with another guest. So yeah, I think I'm just trying to keep the guests coming as we get up to the draft, and then we're hitting summer league, so
Yep.
a lot more for that.
Yeah, I mean, you could even do post-draft stuff because of summer league.
Oh yeah.
Even if you
Oh,
don't
yeah.
get those guys before the draft starts. Just for this feed, we will have, like I mentioned, we want winners. So we'll be back with some 49er stuff this weekend. And then I think we're trying to figure this out. So obviously the passing of Willie Mays, I put something on YouTube and on our Instagram channel about Willie, but Brad and I haven't had a chance to talk about Willie. We're going to try and come back Monday like we normally do, except in these last couple months, we've done more shows for Bleacher Report, so we've been actually recording in a different process. But I think we're gonna try to come back Monday night like normal, like we usually do. We'll do our show about Willie. We'll do our show about the weekend. The Rickwood game is actually going on as Brian and I are chatting, and then we actually have a last show in June for Bleacher Report talking trade deadline. So you'll actually get 2 Thompson to Clarks next week. Hopefully, crossing fingers. Brad's got some stuff with work that's keeping him busy, so we're hopeful that he'll be able to do it. So if all things work out, you will hear a 49er show and a Giant show within the next few days. So that'll be fun. All right, check out Brian's feed, the BAM, for hoop and football, and you guys still have a baseball feed too, right?
Basketball and baseball are the most active. We need to get the football one back active.
Yeah, it's hard doing football stuff in the off season.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll be back next week talking Warriors draft. For Brian, I am Double G. See you when we see you. Peace out.